Worku, to respond to your comment. Yes, it is also, I myself enjoy of Dr. Wayne Dyer, have read many of his books, and I like that he practices what he preaches, and it was too bad that he had to be involved in a lawsuit. I think he could have had an easier time. He had used my translation instead of the one that he ended up using, and I would have been happy to share all of that. It's free on my website, and it's that I'm going to add to. I will be adding a lot more information to it later on. Okay, so I think that's the last question. Okay, excellent. So let me also talk about emotion just a moment before we get going with the meeting. So when dealing with emotions from the Tao perspective, there are subtle aspects to it that requires that we develop the skills to recognize different kinds. So, example, emotions of fear, emotions of excitement to when it comes to wishful thinking. Let me talk about those first. So, a lot of times, as I mentioned, when you are assessing intuitive voice, you can be sidetracked by the emotion of fear. This can be overwhelming, and this can drown out the true voice of wisdom. So the way that you're going to want to recognize the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom is that you want to notice the nitty that the voice of fear inspires within you. You obviously feel afraid, you feel dread about something that is to occur. Whereas intuitive voice, the voice of wisdom, when you actually, there is a very specific feeling. It is sort of like, in science fiction, they say, oh, there's an energy signature that we can lock onto. It's like with the voice of wisdom, there's a characteristic that you will learn to identify over. What is that characteristic? It is also a feeling, but not a feeling of fear. It's a feeling of fear. Recall back to the times in your life when there's been times you just know you don't have sufficient evidence, but you just know something to be true, and then later proven to be correct. That was the conviction, one of the intuitive voice, the wisdom that is always right. So when you had that, when you expect that, there's something that seems kind of plain at first, but it's a feeling of not certainty in the way of like a very excited table pound. Know it. That's not the kind of certainty I mean. A certainty that is very plain and everyday. That's just the way it is. I know it because that's just the way it is. That's the closest that I can describe it. You would also recognize that it's a different emotion than of wanting or desiring, which is what you will feel when you engage in thinking in your mind. You may conjure up a vision. Wow, that is so great. I really like that. Vacation in Hawaii or this and that. Jewels, cars. The emotion of wanting and desiring is then the way that you would identify that it's actually wishful thinking and not the voice of wisdom within you. The voice of wisdom, I'm going to have this one day. It's just the way it is. It's going to happen. I just know it. Okay? Very plain, not overwhelmed with sadness or fear or any other emotions, but a feeling of certainty. Now, there is another way that emotions can also play a role in the journey of a Tao cultivator. So, I shared with you part of his journey. Now, as men were brought up in this culture to not really express our emotion, very well or readily. So as a result, Paul has left out that entire part of his experience. I will just comment that there are going to be times when you will encounter these emotions, not born of fear, not born of desiring or wanting, but strangely enough, a resonance from recollection. Like, I know this, I recognize this, I've seen this before. It is so true, so deep within me that I forgot about it. But now that you mention it and it's resonant, I notice the place where I'm resonating from very deep within me. So recollecting from that and then realizing that at some level you've known it all along. Okay, so very powerful emotion can grip you just like that, but it's not fear, not sadness, it's not desiring, wanting, it's not excitement, it's something else entirely. And it provides you with an important clue that you are on the correct path, that you are on the correct journey. So without delving into details, because some of this is very personal for Bill, he went through that on more than one of, and it provided him with the cues that he needed. He knew that this was the right path. And I mentioned before that Sifu M. Monahan came from a staff as Bill himself. Both of them had fought in matches, sort of like the predecessor to the UFC that we see on TV now. They both used to do that. That was part of their journey, and I'm glad that's not part of my journey. So they went through that very physical aspect of life before coming. So and I mentioned that I was going to a little bit about Ed's journey, that part of it can be very emotionally powerful. So martial arts, a lot of martial arts came from Shaolin. Shaolin is the name of a temple in China. Now today, if you were to go to China today, you can visit the Shaolin temple today. It has become a very popular tourist attraction. It's not really what it used to be. It used to be a very proper, austere temple devoted to Buddhism and also the physical arts of Shaolin Kung Fu. So that's what it used to be, and it was the source of many of the arts that people practice at Ed. So I was one day, so I was telling the story as came to be, in ancient times, that once upon a time there was invading that came to the temple, attacking the temple, setting everything on fire. So the monks had to flee the temple, and that there was a disciple, there was a monk that wanted to defend the temple because it is what he had always known, it's what he had always loved. So he could not stand to see, anything desecrated. So he wanted to stay and fight. But his madam, that it's time for you to go. That this temple, despite all this, this is nothing compared to the concepts that you learn in Buddhism. It is compared to the art that lives within you. So taught him that and ordered him to be on his way. As he ran off away from the temple, he took one last look at the temple itself, ablaze with the fire that was being by the invading army. So as I was describing, inexplicably, Ed had experienced a very strong emotion. It shook him, to his foundations. The feeling was that, wait a minute, I know this. Is this? I've seen this. I know what this feels like. He had a moment of recognition, could not quite explain. Now, usually, any kind of connection like that has other manifestations, other connections in your life. So, the martial arts that M. Monahan has studied was under an American practitioner by the name of who was one of the students of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee studied Wing Chun under a master called Yip Man. Yip Man is Cantonese. In Mandarin, it will be Ye Wen. So that master learned from other master and so forth, traces all the way back, Wing Chun art traces all the way back to Shaolin Temple. So there's all kinds of connections that link everything together so that things that eventually end up happening in life are not happening by accident. So if you find you're having an emotional response, the skill of the Dao cultivators is to take a step and say, what is this emotion that I'm experiencing? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it joy? Is it this and that? And from there, you can usually gain some valuable insights. What you yourself, your higher self, is telling you, communicating with you the language of emotion. Okay? So that's what I wanted to share on the path of the Tao. This is the cover page. This, as I mentioned, the Facebook group. Everyone is welcome to join. The more, the better. And now, look the calendar real quick. So today is the 16th, and what we're about to get into, I think we may actually be able to, we were able to start chapter 19 time. We may actually be able to finish chapter 19 today. If so, I will adjust the schedule. We go into 20, and then 21, 22, etc. So the good news is that there will be upcoming holiday or Sundays where we take a day off. So it's going to be study of the Tao week after week. All right, where we are is in chapter 19. Last time we went through the overall concept of chapter 19. We talked about the three things. So go ahead and do a quick recap, and then we can talk about chapter 19 in detail, line character by character. So chapter 19 says, and sagacity, abandon knowledge, benefit 100 times. And benevolence, abandon righteousness, will return to piety and charity. And cunning, discard profit. Bandits and thieves no longer exist. These three things are superficial. Thus, this teaching has its place. Show plainness, simplicity, reduce selfishness, decrease desires. So that's chapter 19. Last time, what we had also done was to up into two sections. In this particular one, in this particular chapter, it's actually easier to look at this part to see the structure and the division. And you will then be that from line 1 to line 6, every line is exactly 4 characters each, and there's repeating patterns in the 4 characters. So this specifically is that in line 2, you're going to see the same that you will see in the beginning of line 4. So that's a repeating pattern there. And so that gives you a little bit of a clue. Look for other similar patterns. You'll see the beginning of line 1 as the same as the beginning of line 3. It's the same as the beginning of line 5. Looking a little bit further, you will also see character. The third character is also repeated every other line. So these will give us as to the overall structure. And when you look at the English, the structure becomes more plain. Is the, and this, abandon that, and then the result. And this, abandon that, and then the result. And then that, in this case, discard, and then the result. So that is, and then this is sort of the beginning part of this particular chapter, the 6th line, and they point to the 3 kinds of problems that manifest, and therefore, in the second part, it talks about the 3 things being superficial and instant, meaning that they are not sufficient for living a life of the, and therefore we need to counteract the 3 with the solution of the Tao, and that's in the last two lines. And it's all about plainness, simplicity, and the avoidance of selfishness and desires. So let's go ahead and delve into these lines in greater detail. So the way that I want to talk about this is that previously I talked about how line 3 and line 4 can be seen in the world as, the preaching on universal love and tolerance can oftentimes, as we have seen in our society, in our world, can oftentimes coexist with the actual practice of exclusion, of alienation, and intolerance. So think about the reporting, think about the news, think about things that we see when some of the most pious people that lead public lives end up being exposed as the very opposite of what about every Sunday. So as you know, I don't want to get into details as far as names, but it's a pattern that we have seen again and again. Whenever there is a pattern, you can be sure that is something that the Tao sages will be very interested in describing, understand all patterns, and then so they can see, do we want to follow that same pattern, or do we want to pattern and follow a better pattern, a different pattern? So because of the sensitive nature of this particular subject, here, this is the reason why I don't want to spend a lot of it and use a lot of examples. I want to count on everyone knowing pretty much when I talk about news items, scandals that break out, people exposed, etc. So the benevolence here, this would be equivalent to universal love that we hear about, and sometimes when people that are not practicing universal love but are practicing and intolerance. And the righteousness here, the specific meaning is the righteous anger, the righteous wrath that we see quite a bit, and all across the land every Sunday there's plenty of expressions on that: hellfire and damnation, lakes of eternal fire, torment, etc. All of that, there's that's a thing. What I mean by that is this of preaching to the masses is to put the fear into them so that they lie. So I'm going to suggest that that's a very antiquated notion. It's the way it's been for many centuries now, but I think we as humanity, we as a species, move beyond that. We're ready to, you can see the equivalent in children, in very young children, having to be disciplined so that they would know what they avoid. Like, don't stick a sharp object into a electric, you get a nasty shock, and that's going to teach you to never do that. Don't touch you're going to be burned, and that's going to teach you to never do that again. So I think humanity has passed the stage of being like a little infant that needs to be warned against all these different things, warned on the pain of injury, maybe even death, monster in the closet. So humanity itself, I think, can now be the next step, which is the enlightened self-interest. That is, you want to be good. Why? Because the karmic laws are such that everything that you give out, you're gonna give back in plenitude, and therefore, if what you give out is negative and it's coming back worse, then you're gonna want to be wise and not do that. Indeed, you're gonna want your best with everyone, because that's going to come back at you as a goodness many times over. So that, I think, is the better way than don't do that for all of eternity. I think we're past that. So what this is saying, so it's funny, this is written 2,500 years ago, 500 years ago, is saying that if we were to end that type of self-preaching on love, then people will naturally return to piety and charity. They don't have to be told what to do. They can follow their nature to be good. They don't have to be warned to be good or suffer the consequences. They will be good by themselves. So those are the middle two lines. The way that I divide them out is because here we have, sagacity, knowledge. It's actually related to cunning here in line 5. Talk about those two things together. So that's kind of the plan. I get rid of the middle part, discuss the middle part first, dispose of it, and then we talk about the first part and the last as being one and the same, or the same kind of thought.
Last week, I was out at a meeting, and Scott said something to me, and I said to him, I'm a boss. And it turned into like a little argument. We ended up just going our separate ways. It was awful. And then I started thinking about you, Cal. And when I was learning, I said, oh my God, it's trouble. I was really repentant. So I was going to call him up, and he ended up sitting there, and I said, stating he was hard. And I said, to be dedicated. And I said, we're going to do this. So I'm saying, I caught myself. I don't know, I caught myself. But it was the dad who brought me back in. So maybe there is something to make good. I mean, you say, you don't need it, but I wasn't naturally doing what I wanted.
Yeah, I think so. For everyone who didn't quite catch that, on the internet, BB is relating an experience during the week where I think, given back a negative directed at her, and it escalated into ever more negativity. There's going to be times when we react that way in a contentious way. Oftentimes it's actually ego-inspired. So there's also, sometimes we see examples of living sages that they're so highly accomplished but place themselves higher. So when they encounter something like that, they're actually very calm and collected. They can handle it from sort of a demeanor of tranquility, but in a peaceful way. So that's what we have to work on. Now, that capability of being able to handle it very calmly and very peacefully, that's within you as well. That's also natural. So when we talk about being natural, within there is a natural part of you that is like, that's part of you too. Let's not deny that. And then there's another, which is the peaceful. Oh, I see. Tell me more. That's also part of you. So the skill in Tao cultivation is in deciding of natural components within you, which tool is the most appropriate at this time to apply to this particular situation. It's like it's a particular screw with a screwdriver. You're going to want to make sure that the screwdriver that you pick, that in terms of size, Phillips, flat, whatever, so that you can get the effect if you choose to screw something tighter or to unscrew it.
That other side, because I felt it was terrible. And I just described it right. I think it was in my part as well. More because I was wrong. I was wrong, not even a judge. So because of that kicked out of me, I think that's the part that is not supposed to be. How do you like, what purpose is that? Is it time to use it? Is it Phillips needs the fact that
Well, when you're in the moment, it can be rather remember that this is what I should be doing, and this is a better strategy, or this is a better path. What Tao cultivation can and should do for you is to habit that helps you when the moment comes. So there's gonna be times something like this happens again, that one great habit to get into, which is something I use myself when I encounter something like that, is that I try to put some distance between the source of negativity first. So in a similar case as describing, when someone is asking me all about stuff, and what I'm thinking is that, hey, wait a minute, why are you asking me these questions, right? What I do instead, rather than to say it back to the person, is that I suddenly find that I have other things that I need to do, and so to other people and handle those matters first. Rather than to respond, I could actually do other things first. I put a little bit of distance in the source of negativity initially, and by the time that I came back, to see if it needed to be answered, the question still needed to be answered, well, that person had over to something else. It wasn't really that important. Then I realized that I did not deal out of it because it was a question that was asked casually. There wasn't a whole lot that was dependent on it. In my mind, at the time I was upset and angry, I made it a lot bigger than it was. Distance and come back to it, I see it for what it truly was. All right, so I'm about to launch into a discussion on sagacity, knowledge, cunning, profits, etc. And all of this. Next slide. I can talk to it. All of this has the effect of leading to arrogance. So what I've done, let me kind of go back one and then have everyone take a look at the Chinese characters for line 1. So you don't have to be able to read Chinese. Remember the characters and the shapes, and then take a look at the title for the next slide and use those same characters in different color. Hopefully that didn't throw you off. So these are the 4 characters from line 1 of this particular chapter. So the first end, or to terminate, to cease. The second character, this is the one that requires explanation. So elsewhere in the Tao Te Ching, this is used with the character 人, 圣人, to mean someone who is so wise that approaches the divine. So this character by itself means divine or sacred. But in this case, it is actually talking about sagacity is the translation, and it's talking kind of book knowledge that actually will lead to error. So this means to abandon. This character means abandon, to discard, get rid of. And then this last character also requires explanation. So in Chinese, it means intelligence or wisdom. Here, again, both the divine and sacred and the character for intelligence and wisdom, they're both being used to point to the underside or the dark side of intelligence. Now, it's not what we normally associate with the dark side or the underside or whatever. These are talking about things, book knowledge, the overwhelming or the excessive focus, knowledge that leads to arrogance. Now, even though we don't normally this kind of usage in our culture, if I say, think of one who has a title like PhD or the vice president or director or the CEO, this and that, and flaunts his or her position or knowledge and is someone who displays a massive ego. If I say, everyone will be like, yeah, oh yeah, we see people like that. I've seen people like that. We know people like that. It's not foreign to our experience, and that's what Lao Tzu is talking about. That it is possible that you can get people following that particular pattern, learning some from a subject, and then beginning to see themselves as a specialist or an expert subject matter, and then using that to assert dominance over other people, which is what this kind of arrogant behavior is. So I want to break characteristics of that. So first of all, what I mean by arrogance, this will be, when we talk about something like pride, it can be used in different ways. You can talk about, I'm so proud of my son. You know, you have this very positive feeling for something great that your child has accomplished. Or you can say prideful. You know, feeling too prideful, and it becomes the type of arrogance. So that word can be used in different ways. Here, when I talk about arrogance, I'm strictly speaking of this attitude of superiority over other people. That comes from this illusory idea that we're separate, and if separate and isolated from one another, then there's got to be somebody who's above, somebody who's below. The arrogant people will always see themselves in the position of being above. In actual reality, we are all uneven. There's going to be places, there's aspects of life when you are better than someone else, and there's also going to be places at the same person where they can teach you a thing or two. That's the way life works. It makes life interesting. The arrogant person will be someone who feels like, you know, I am better than you in a conceivable way. So that is the superiority illusion we're talking about. So what can happen, what can easily happen is that this can assume that they know everything just by knowing it. So from partial knowledge, they will expand on that to assume full knowledge. I'll give you guys some examples in just a moment. So how can you tell that this is the case? One way to tell is the overuse of foreign phrases and factoids for the purpose of showing off. You might have encountered people like this, you know, people who are constantly saying, did you know circumference of the earth is, you know, did you know that the Great Pyramids of Egypt were not built by this and that, but, you know, what is the purpose of that? It is to say, look, don't know that I know. You know, look how much I know more than you do. It's all ego-driven. So using foreign phrases, it's very similar. I mean, in America, speaking English, you cannot avoid foreign phrases. There's going to be a lot of borrowed phrases from, you know, foreign languages in English every day, but there's definitely the excessive. Someone will borrow a phrase here and there. Now, let me say that I made this remark directed at North American culture, or the people that are in it, or European culture, or whatever, putting this at humanity. So, as an example, and I don't want to examine Chinese people themselves or Taiwanese people as being somehow, you know, better practice with the Tao. They're human people. They're human as well. They make mistakes. So, if you were to become an expatriate and live, you know, perhaps in Taiwan, and you interact with local people, you're going to find some who will, just like, you know, people that we see over here, they love terms that they have a foreign language ability, and therefore, in everyday speech, working phrases in English just to show, hey guys, hey everybody, I know language. You know, it's to show off. It's also ego-driven. Sometimes odd. You know, you can hear someone speaking like entirely in Chinese. You hear actually, you know, English word, and then the rest of it in Chinese, and then the starts with actually, and then all in Chinese. It sounds really strange. So that's the kind of thing. Now, let me talk about quotes real quick. When you're quoting in everyday speech or in a book, a special book, the reason why you quote someone is because there's been a person that has come up with such an insightful, great way to express, so great that you cannot think of a more appropriate way to express an idea or concept, and therefore you quote this person. Okay. Now, that's the purpose of quoting, but the purpose of quoting has actually been twisted, has been corrupted by people who want to show how well read they are. So they quote from all these different, see, someone in the example that I'm about to, it's a scientist who wants to say basically that, hey guys, I'm well read in the humanities. I'm not just a science guy. I know all liberal arts. So it's an attempt at showing off. It is not using quote purpose, which is to express something that was so well said. Can't say it any better, therefore you quote that person. So I want to say that arrogance, you may think that, people don't really know how much they know, and therefore they become arrogant. So I want to say this one last thing that's also very, when I say likelihood proportional with intelligence, what I'm saying is that this is actually the affliction of the intelligent. So kind of a set of affairs to say that in our world, the more intelligent you are, the more likely to fall into the trap of arrogance. So it doesn't apply to everybody. There are some high people, because of how intelligent they are, become extremely humble. But then there are people who fall short, that they're not quite at the level of a genius, but they feel like they are. So proportional with intelligence. So just being smart, the assumption is that if you are so smart, wouldn't you already figure out your way out of being arrogant? No. It's actually the other way, because arrogance comes from within, and there's usually no defense. Self-directed delusions of grandeur. So this is a very obscure example, by the way. I really hesitated to talk about this, because this plays into the very last bullet point here. Now remember, I have no wish to criticize anyone, therefore I will not name. There is a book that's written by a scientist. It's a best-selling book. The scientist is probably the most brilliant, the best-known scientist of our time. So this is not this is a very intelligent person. This is no dummy. So in this book, this particular scientist and astronomer wants to express the vision of human beings exploring space, other planets. It's a grand vision filled with optimism, filled with the future. So, frankly, this scientist is a personal hero of mine. Many of his books, I really, consider myself to be one of his students. So then it was a bit of a shock when I saw this. In one of his books, he wrote an introduction about wanderers. What he wants to say is that human beings have been wanderers from the very beginning. Ever since primitive human beings have wandered the earth, looking for food, looking for better, looking for resources, and going forward, we're going to be wanderers among the stars. So it's a very positive message, right? So when I read that introduction, I thought, okay, with this book, I'm in for a treat. I love this stuff. I have a background in science. Then I see this quote here. It says, but tell me, who are they, these wanderers? And this is from a poem from the 1920s, and the fifth elegy. It's a German poet. Rilke is his name. People assume it's Rainer Maria Rilke, and because of Maria, that it might be female, but it's actually a male poet. So when I saw this, immediately I knew that my idol, my hero, the scientist, the great astronomer, had fallen into the same trap of arrogance. He had no idea what he was quoting. He quoted, and it's something that doesn't fit the theme of his book. So it is so obscure. So this is sort of like most people that write translations, they feel very safe in doing that because they know they will never be called on it. Whatever say that, listen, your passage here, this is a mistranslation. They can enjoy their celebrity. They can enjoy this facade of being very knowledgeable. So very obscure. Only a few crazy people would say that, oh, hey, that's wrong. Explain why that is wrong. First of all, but tell me, who are they? These wanderers. This is from a poem. He wants to take off on wanderers because say that humanities are wanderers. Now, the original in German doesn't actually say. Number one, this is a mistranslation. Perhaps I was sensitive to it because I've been working with translations. That mistranslations will alert me. The original poet wrote a sad poem, a poem of sadness, based on this, a painting by Picasso. This is, and by the way, I studied art history, to talk a little bit about this. Picasso had a period known as period. This was considered to be a masterpiece from the Rose period. What it depicts is a troupe of acrobats. These are traveling acrobats, circus performers. They're gathering together, but the interesting thing about this painting is that this group of circus performers, wandering circus performers, traveling circus performers, dress in their costumes, which have bright colors, and yet their expressions are forlorn. This is overall a bleak painting, sort of a lonely state. When people are gathering together, looking at one another, they're isolated among themselves. It's expressed feeling of sadness. The poem talks about who are they? Who are these acrobats that are traveling from here to there? And look how they're twisted, contorted into different, because they're acrobats, which is a metaphor for how fate is twisting people through life that are lonely, that are isolated from other people. That's why it's called the Fifth Elegy. It's a sad poem. So the great astronomer does not understand this and is using that as a quote for a chapter that is meant to inspire great optimism. So on many levels, that's a mistake, but I know that probably no one other than me has caught that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe very, very few people in the world. But this is an example of how someone can assume understanding from partial knowledge. By knowing just a little bit of that poem and latching onto the word, the wanderer, that happens to match the title of the introduction, using that quote in an entirely erroneous way, and not realizing that this is the case, and not being called on it, still enjoying the celebrity. So this particular, so then that's when I realized that while there's probably other manifestations of for using his name as the code name for an internal process. So the astronomer lost the lawsuit after considerable legal expense. But Apple computer engineers decided to change anyway. They changed the code name from his name to BA, which means butthead astronomer. The astronomer sued again, saying that this is a insult to my personal reputation, and he lost that lawsuit a second time. So I want to use that as a cautionary note for everyone, because when you grips of arrogance, you are blind to reality. You are not really what's going on, and you can be acting in a way that later on other people will find ridiculous, and you don't even see how ridiculous that is because you're in the middle of it. Now, I want to also go off of the costume to segue into the idea of attire. And I want to use another example in this recent times to talk about this whole concept of arrogance. And here, this slide, I'm going to come to this a little bit. This is important. This is talking about how to deal with arrogance because, you know, as you're listening to this, you might be thinking, but what if I'm the person who is arrogant? What if I'm the one who can't stand stupid people? Because people are so stupid, they really make me upset. You know, that's entirely possible. So I want to talk about a way to correct that. Now, let me give you this story first. I think this will be this will set the stage for the solution that I'm talking about. So once upon a time in ancient China, there is a government official tailored for a new robe. So these robes the officials wear, they're very elaborate. They required, you know, just exceptional tailoring. So the tailored him, you know, how tall he is, his different measurements, his size, and then the tailor said, Your Excellency, how many years official? And this official says, what does that have to do with it? You know, why do you need to know how many years I've been an official to tailor this robe for me? You know, does it make a difference? And the tailor says, Your Excellency, it does. And now, the official is really, and also a little upset, being contradicted, and says, explain. So the tailor says, if you've been an official for less than 5 years, then I need to give you plenty of fabric up front because you will be walking around like this, you know, with your chest all puffed out. You feel like you can do no wrong. You are here to rule. So with that attitude, I need to make sure that coverage. If, Your Excellency, you've been an official for more than 5 years but less than 10, then I need to create a robe for you with the amount of fabric front and back. Because after 5 years, you realize that indeed you don't have the power that you thought you had. You did not make all the differences we're going to make for the people. You only sense the weight of responsibilities, and it's going to into the chest puffed out into a more of an even keel, walking around, you know, thinking about what's the next thing that I need to do. And, Your Excellency, you've been an official for 10 years, then I need a different adjustment yet again. Because senior official who has been in office for more than 10 years, chances are has been in a higher position, chances are has to deal with many superiors, possibly even the royal court where the senior officials are, and therefore there's going to be constant bowing. There's going to be, you know, subjugating yourself to the whims of the higher officials. I'm going to need to give you a lot more fabric to accommodate your new posture. So that is the why I need to find out how many years you've been an official. So the underlining concept there is how what we think, you know, in the mind can affect external physical manifestations, the posture, you know, demeanor, tone of voice in addressing other people. And it's something to watch out for, right? So, for instance, a Tao cultivator will make its own personal task a goal to, you know, even if he is a new appointed official in the government of ancient China, will take pains, being humble, to practice the Tao of humility. And the Tao, as I have mentioned previously, is not the Tao of self-humiliation. There's a big difference. Someone who is humble can still be someone who is supremely confident and self-aware. No do. But it never goes into the feeling of superiority or arrogance over other people. So now let's hit that important slide. You know, what if I just can't stand people are so stupid? You know, you hear that from others quite a bit. You may have caught yourself not saying it, but thinking it. Okay? So first of all, you're not alone. This is very common. I think a lot of us have had the same experience. Now, I want to convey to you this train of thought. This is the last thing that we have time for today. Then we'll end the meeting with the summary. Just can't stand stupid people. So number one, keep in mind, people they can with what they have. So this is always true. If they are not doing as much as they can with what they have, like intelligence, it may be because they don't have enough motivation. So people are constantly doing the best they can with what they have. If what they do is not good enough to fit your standards, it's most likely because they don't have enough of what it takes. So that's number two. Often, have is not a whole lot. And nobody is perfect, so there's always times when all of us do not have enough, do not have a whole lot. So the reason why you feel like you didn't stand stupid people, and you would spell stupid with two O's, stoop, right, instead of with a U. When you feel upset, when they make you mad, just can't stand them. When they get under your skin, they really get to you, make you upset, is because you see that what they have is less than what you have. You feel distinct that they don't have as much as you do. Okay? And what they have could be like intelligence, could be education, or could be both. If they don't have as much intelligence as you do, you will be thinking they're dumb. That is really dumb. That is so dumb, right? If they're not educated, your disdainful thinking is going to be, they're so ignorant. Boy, they are ill-informed, right? Or both. Boy, they're stupid and ignorant. So it makes you feel superior to them, disdainful toward them. That's arrogance, the problem. That's why you cannot stand stupid people, quote unquote, is because of this. So that's the first part, lines 1, 2, 3. Now, here's the pivot. This is the pivot of the Tao. Turn that around and consult chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching if necessary. But what it says is that when there is a short, when there is a tall, there is a not so tall. When there is a big, there is a not so big. There is a small. And vice versa. Therefore, if you have more than they do, I don't care what it is, patient, maybe intelligence, maybe motivation, no matter what it is that you have, they do, that they have less than you do, it just automatically means that you have more than they do. You're smarter than they are, you have more education than they do, you're more motivated than they are, etc. It just goes on. So everything logically so far. Now, number 5, that this is entirely due to random chance. So this is the part that people are like, what? No, not random chance. I'm smarter. How were you smarter? Okay, well, born that way. And was there something that you did before you were born that caused you? No, there wasn't. You were born smarter because you won the lottery. And what did you do to deserve that? Absolutely nothing. So it's due to random chance that this is the way things are. It's luck that caused you to have more than they do, and they less than you do. And that's why I say that is a remarkable yet undeserved blessing. You didn't do anything to deserve it. You were just given it. It's a blessing. It's a God-given gift. And when you think it through that way, you realize that the correct feeling is not disdain. It is gratitude. Gratitude for what? For having something that you never really did deserve in the first place. When you are well practiced with this train of thought to end, that whenever you feel superior to someone, you run through this once, then it is a guarantee that this will turn you into a learned and better individual. Sense to everybody? Let us now move on to the summary for today. So, yeah, I have a lot more, but that's okay. So this is the summary from last time. My challenge to you from before was, are you spending more time applying the Tao? Hopefully not. Hopefully you're living the Tao every day, your time reading about it. Do you have moments of self-righteousness and condemnation? And this, if you guys recall, this was my New Year resolution for Chinese New Year. Or critical remarks directed at people. And are you always honest when you're dealing with them? You look out for their best interests. And my remark from last time was that being honest is something that I want to caution everyone to not abuse, to not miss. Like you criticizing someone else, you pointing out their flaws, you being very harsh, mental, and then justifying to yourself, I'm just being honest. Okay, so for transform arrogance to appreciation. How? Well, with the 7 exactly as we have just talked about. So we haven't really had time to talk about plainness. So we will save that for next time. And now, I think we're a little bit over the half-hour mark. It's time for us to do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. Please follow me. 起立，面向佛堂，打3鞠躬，1鞠躬，再鞠躬，3鞠躬，赐下各位点传师1鞠躬，结班1鞠躬。Hey, we're done, everybody. Thank you so much. Cool. Alex, thank you. Ellen, thank you. Luis, I totally agree. Easier said than done.